Hi, it's Thursday, September 4th, and we're tracking three systems across the East Pacific and the Atlantic today. Going left to right, we have Hurricane Kiko here in the western part of this globe. Category 4 hurricane right now and is forecast to maintain major hurricane intensity for the next several days, but it will be weakening as it tracks northwest closer to the Hawaiian Islands next week, and we could see some impacts there as the system draws closer. We've also got Tropical Storm Lorena off the west coast of the Baja California Peninsula. This system is very close to the coastline right now, bringing tropical storm force winds to Baja California, though the primary risk going forward will be heavy rainfall across northwestern Mexico, which could lead to some flooding issues over the next couple of days. We've also got newly dubbed Invest 91L in the tropical Atlantic, which is gradually tracking west towards the Caribbean islands this week, and the system is likely to form over the next few days, and this will be worth watching for the Lesser Antilles, and we'll talk about this in detail towards the end of the video. And I'll leave a timestamp to all of these systems if you want to skip ahead to a certain part of these, but for the beginning, we're going to start off with Tropical Storm Lorena here off the coast of Baja California. And this system has had a very wild shift over the past day. This time yesterday, we had a recon flight fly in, and they found the system was a hurricane with winds of about 80 to 85 miles per hour, and that really was its peak intensity. Since then, we've seen vertical shear increase drastically, as was expected, though it seems to have become strong a little bit earlier than a lot of models had anticipated. And so now we see the system is very disheveled today, with the center of circulation now exposed and all of the showers and thunderstorms associated with it now being pushed over the landmass. And so this is partially good news because we do have the system not being very strong anymore. So it's not likely to become or come in rather to the Baja California Peninsula as any kind of a strong storm. Although the bad side is that we are still getting the heavy rainfall and tropical storm force winds that the system would have brought if it had made landfall. And it might even be made even worse because we do have a jet stream or a jet streak across this region, which is providing ample lift across this region, which may be enhancing some of the thunderstorms that we have across this region. And the primary risk going forward with the system is going to be the heavy rainfall here, and it could get to very high totals here in northwestern Mexico as the moisture runs up against the slopes of the mountains here, as it's sort of like, I've used this analogy several times before, but it's sort of like a wet sponge. You squeeze it and all the water comes out, and that's practically what the mountain slopes do when the wind rushes up against those mountainous terrain. And you can see that illustrated here in this rainfall forecast from the Weather Prediction Center, with a wide swath of 2 to 6 inches of rain across northwestern Mexico, with some locally higher totals exceeding 8 inches, which could absolutely lead to a lot of flooding issues here in northwestern Mexico. Now, for the coast of Baja California, we could still have some tropical storm force winds throughout the day today. You can see we do have a tropical storm warning in effect for that risk here as the system gradually tracks north towards the coast. But you can see the track has very much shifted from the past couple of days, from what we were expecting it to come across northwestern Mexico to now not even making a landfall in Baja California. And this is primarily due to the system weakening, and now it's just simply going to follow the surface flow, which is tracking northwest, but still getting a lot of impacts here in northwestern Mexico. So stay safe as the system does continue to bring impacts. But this will be my last update on the system as it decays away over the next day off of Baja California. Okay, that's Lorena done with. We're now going to talk about Hurricane Kiko in the open tropical Pacific. The system has had a pretty impressive peak over the past day. Yesterday evening, it attained a peak intensity of 145 miles per hour, making it a mid-grade Category 4 hurricane. And the system has weakened from that peak a little bit since that time. Overnight, the eye had clouded over. It's a bit unclear to me exactly what happened. Microwave imagery did not really show a clear-cut eye wall replacement cycle that would have occurred, but it is possible that one occurred between those passes. But also, it appeared to me that some shear had increased out of the east, and the combination of those two likely has caused the system to come off of that peak a little bit. Now, we do see today the system structure is getting a little bit better today, and the eye has at times tried to clear it out again, and it's likely that the system will reattain a very similar peak intensity to what it had yesterday evening sometime today or sometime tomorrow. Maybe a little bit stronger if it plays its cards right. But the good news is here, and the most important fact, is that this is all happening out to sea. We're not ever expecting the system to become major hurricane landfall for Hawaii. This is never going to be Cat 4 coming into the island, but it could be a tropical storm still by the time it gets to those islands, and I'll show you the forecast starting now. This is the steering flow for the system at the 500 millibar level, and you can see that right now we've gotten this spread, an area of high pressure just north of the hurricane, which is right here. This has been in place for the past several days and is what's been tracking the system towards the west. But as the system comes further west, you'll see that we have this area of blue here dig in from the north. I could show you this here on the loop over the Hawaiian Islands, or north of there rather. And this is an upper low that is cutting off and sitting here north of the Hawaiian Islands by this weekend. This is by Sunday afternoon local time. And so what this is going to do is it's going to make a break between these two areas of high pressure. So now there's this break in between. Kiko is simply going to try and go in between this break and try to recurve north. But this is not going to be one of those cases like we have commonly in the Atlantic, where the system is just going to go out to sea harmlessly away, as the system will be weakening by this point. And this becomes important, and we talked about this a couple of days ago with the Atlantic system 91L, and I'll illustrate it again as we go through these model frames. You can see right now, as the system is strong over the warm waters, if we get a cross section of this, so if we imagine this like I'm baking a cake and I'm cutting it in half to see if it is cooked all the way through, for example, and you cut it in half, you pull the other half away, and you're looking at all the layers of the cake, that's practically what we're doing with the hurricane here with this cross section. And you can see that as it's a strong hurricane like it is now, the thunderstorms are towering very high into the atmosphere. So when it's tracking into this region with these two steering features, the tug north that these two features have is stronger on the hurricane. So it begins to gain latitude. But you'll notice in the sea surface temperature plot, which is the colors here in the background, that the waters are cooling off considerably from where it is now. And this will start to cause the system to weaken by this point. You can see the red number in the middle here begins to rapidly rise on the model, indicating that weakening taking place. And so as I take a cross section now of the system, what you'll notice is that the thunderstorms are now not nearly as high as they were when it was a strong major hurricane. And so what happens is the tug north from this upper low and this ridge becomes less of an impact upon the vortex of the hurricane. So it's going to begin to bend back towards the west. Now, the crucial detail here is, when does this bend west occur? At what latitude does it happen? And this is primarily dependent on how quick the system weakens. Now, something to watch for over the next several days is something called an annular hurricane, Kiko taking on annular characteristics. And the very basic gist with this is that you see in this microwave pass that we have the eye of the storm here, and surrounding it we have these banding features, bands of thunderstorms surrounding the system. An annular hurricane basically is a hurricane shedding most of these banding features, and through that process it can be able to maintain its intensity a little bit better, even going into cooler waters like we have here east of the Hawaiian Islands. And if the system is stronger, like I showed in those cross sections, the system has more vertical depth through the atmosphere. So it's going to feel this northerly tug from this ridge and this upper low more. So it's going to be inclined to go further north. Now, on the specific HAPS model run, the system weakens considerably. So it makes this westward bend further south, and we get a direct impact to the Hawaiian Islands. But something we'll have to watch for is if we do get the system to become annular and it maintains intensity better here east of the Hawaiian Islands, it's possible that it does make this westward bend north of the Hawaiian Islands, which would be very good news, because if we look at the winds aloft as this system is getting very near the islands, by this point the system is here. And again, by this point, the system will be tracking west, making that westward bend. You can see that we have, with this upper level low, strong southwesterly flow, and the net effect of this is a very strong vertical shear out of the southwest. And so any thunderstorm that the system has, similar very much so right now to Tropical Storm Lorena off the coast of Baja California, all the thunderstorms are just going to get pushed off to the northeastern side of the vortex. And so if the system does take this track further northeast or north of the Hawaiian Islands, that would leave most of the impacts over open water, not impacting these islands. Whereas if we do see the system come further south, we would likely see more impacts across these islands. And with the high terrain here, we could see more increased flooding risk with the heavy rainfall that this system's thunderstorms would bring. And of course, the specific details of where exactly it's going to impact will become more and more clear as we go in time. But what is becoming evident by this point is that impacts to the Hawaiian Islands are an increasing probability, and it's certainly something to watch over the next few days in the Hawaiian Islands. Now, again, it's not going to be a hurricane making landfall here. Even if it is an annular hurricane and maintains a lot of strength over this part of the Pacific, this strong vertical shear will weaken the system rapidly no matter what the state of the hurricane is. So it's not going to be a very strong storm making landfall here. But very similar to what I talked about with Lorena in Mexico with the high terrain, you don't need a lot of rainfall to cause a lot of big issues in Hawaii. And that's certainly been seen in past years. 2018 one comes to mind with hurricanes Lane and tropical storm Olivia that came through this region. And those storms, even though like Hurricane Lane never made a direct landfall, we still had a lot of impacts there, strong impacts with heavy rainfall there. And similarly to Tropical Storm Olivia that came through that year. And so we could see a risk of flash flooding and in higher terrain, some gusty winds that may lead to some power outages across the island if the system does take that track further south. But you can see in the 5-day forecast count from the National Hurricane Center, this outlines those potential tracks that I just talked about being possible, with the system maybe going north. That would be the better solution, or maybe going south. The storm could realistically go anywhere within this white shaded area, and you can see the cone is now touching the eastern part of the Hawaiian Islands. So it's certainly something to watch over the next few days. The Hurricane Center will keep having advisories on this over the next several days, and of course the weather office in Honolulu will also have local information on this as certainty increases on the potential impacts that we may see here in the Hawaiian Islands. Okay, finally, we're going back to the Atlantic today as we have newly dubbed Invest 91L across the tropical Atlantic today. And the system is gradually tracking west this week and is likely to form over the next few days as it comes west. So the system may be more of a gradual development, as was sort of alluded to over the past couple of videos I talked about the system. And the reason for that is that the system is entangled within the intertropical convergence zone. Still, we do see in the visible loop over the system right now that an area of low pressure is seemingly forming underneath of this convection, which at first glance does look rather healthy for this disturbance. But something to keep in mind is that if we look at this on the broader view, this is showing you the low level spin in yellow shading here. The wind barbs are the wind direction at the 850 millibore level, not too far off the surface. You can see that here's that area of low pressure that's forming. This is Invest 91L, but you can see we have all this westerly flow here with easterly flow further north, denoting very nicely the intertropical convergence zone in which 91L is embedded within. And typically systems that are embedded within the convergence zone like this tend to be more gradual with development. Now, partially that has to do with the size of the wave or the disturbance that the system has. That can be an impact of how quickly it develops. But in this system's case, it's more so multiple areas of low pressure that may be present along this intertropical convergence zone. It is true that with the background spin that the intertropical convergence zone naturally has, that we could, through that, allow better formation of an area of low pressure like we are seeing today with our disturbance. But the downside of that is that you can also get other areas of low pressure. And you can see that here further west, we have this other area of low pressure, which was noted this morning on an ASCAT pass that passed over this part of the Atlantic. And especially today, we've seen models pick up on this area of low pressure being here, the presence of this area of low pressure being here. And so this does cause some issues for the future forecast for the system, because naturally systems do, or models with systems like this do tend to struggle with development and forecasts with systems in intertropical convergence zone. I'll just call it the convergence zone to make that easier to say. And the difficulty, like I mentioned, is that we can have multiple areas of low pressure forming in here. And so models are not really sure exactly which one of these could become the dominant low. There's a lot of interaction that can occur between these two as well. You'll notice that in the GFS run, in this specific run, these two both intensify in their own right, and at some point, they begin to revolve around each other. This one tracks southeast, and this one, 91L, this would be rotates southwest of this. And so this also does have an impact on track, because that may push it further south initially, which may have a further south starting point. What you may have noticed if you watched my video a couple of days ago is that the GFS at day 7 was originally up here. Now we're way down here, and even now we're still seeing trends up and down in latitude in the tropical Atlantic. You can see right now it's further south, run before much further north. And the interaction between this disturbance in this 91L and this other low to the west is going to be crucial in determining how fast the system develops and also what kind of track this takes. For example, if we have the system forming earlier, this low is not really too much of an issue, and the system is able to form and begin intensifying earlier on, it will likely gain more latitude earlier. In fact, that's what the last run of the GFS had. You could see it forming earlier, intensifying, and it moves north of the Caribbean islands. That fact of what I talked about a few days ago of a stronger storm will tend to gain latitude more still remains true today. But if we do have a scenario where this other low is stronger, like it was observed today, and becomes more of a hindrance for 91L's development, that may impede how much intensification we may see over the next few days. And a weaker storm is going to tend to stay more south throughout the forecast period. And you can see on this forecast, instead of going north of the Caribbean islands on the specific run, we actually see the system come through these islands as a hurricane in this forecast. Now, keep in mind, this is next weekend. This is Saturday, September 13th. We are still a long way away. This is day 7 when it's just approaching the Lesser Antilles. So there is still going to be a lot of uncertainty to unpack here and get certain over the next few days. And this alone is a very strong uncertainty maker here in the forecast. It is certainly something to monitor for the Caribbean islands. But as of right now, it is no imminent threat. Now, I know the big question is, we know an area full of pressure is likely to come west at some point, and it's likely that we're going to have a tropical system form. What are the odds that this system does intensify as it comes west? Now, initially, the environment is going to be generally favorable for some development. The trade winds out here are not all too strong. There may be some hindrance of some surrounding dry air in the environment, but if we look at the upper levels of the atmosphere, we also have light winds aloft, and this would tend to favor intensification as the system comes west. You'll see that on the model, this red number does decrease gradually, which shows some gradual intensification. Now, as it comes closer to the Caribbean, there may be some increasing shear that may disrupt some intensification. You'll see that we do see some fluctuations up and down with the pressure number here in the GFS as it approaches these islands. And even though this is a rather ideal setup, typically for a hurricane in the upper levels of the atmosphere, the reality is that this is making light flow aloft. And as it approaches the Caribbean, it's not as strong as it would be in, say, July, because it is September right now, but we do still have 10 to 15 knot trade winds as you approach the Caribbean. And so this may make for a little bit of moderate shear as the system approaches, and that may hold the system back from, say, rapid intensification before coming through the islands. I think right now the best thing to expect is a tropical storm to come through sometime next week in these Caribbean islands. Anything beyond that is just pure speculation by this point, but 91L is absolutely something to pay attention to, because unlike what it seemed like a couple of days ago, it is not clear at all exactly which way the system is going to track. We don't know if it's going to miss the islands. We don't know if it's going to hit the islands. This is a 7+ day forecast still. Lots of things can change from here on out. And I'm not going to speculate any on what could happen beyond this point, because by the time we're at the Lesser Antilles, this is already September 13th. And there's way too much uncertainty in the pattern further north that could easily change the track of the system further west drastically. And something to note is that you're going to see over the next few days online a lot of model runs from the GFS or the European showing a hurricane that may be hitting the Greater Antilles, the Bahamas, the US. Just know that those are very long range deterministic runs of these models, and what one model shows one day is not what's going to happen in the future. In fact, the GFS has been changing a lot. We've gone from, in just a couple of runs, what could have been a hurricane on the southeast coast of the US to something that's way out to sea, way out by Bermuda. There is a unlimited amount of ranges of potential tracks for this system. So don't let fear-mongering get to you with those model run forecasts that are posted online. Unfortunately, this is a thing that happens every year with these systems, but just know it's way too far out to know any specifics of what any kind of threat this would have. But it is a reminder that we are in September. And this is peak of hurricane season, so this stuff is expected. We deal with hurricanes in this part of the world this time of year every single year. So it's always worthwhile to watch these systems as they come west and have your hurricane plan ready in case it does threaten your area. And if this one doesn't, who's to say the next one can't? So keep your hurricane plan ready throughout the end of hurricane season in November. Always best to be safe than sorry. But you can see on the outlook from the National Hurricane Center, very high chance of the system developing over the next few days, 90% chance in 7 days, 60% chance in the next couple of days, and you can see that track generally tracking west towards the Caribbean islands. That's all that I've got for today on all of these systems. I'll have more videos on Kiko and 91L for the next several days as necessary, and stay safe in Mexico as Lorena brings impacts there with rainfall and tropical storm force winds. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.